The throne room of Aethon Prime was built to make visitors feel small. Giant pillars of black stone rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Golden light fell from hidden sources, touching only what the architects wanted seen. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single asteroid, sat High Archon Velathos III, ruler of the Velthari Dominion. Before him knelt representatives from a dozen worlds. Each one brought tribute, rare metals, ancient artifacts, promises of loyalty. The Velthari had ruled this part of the galaxy for 6,000 years. Their empire stretched across 12,000 star systems. Their warships numbered in the millions. No one challenged them. No one dared. Velathos watched the proceedings with cold yellow eyes. His gray skin was marked with golden tattoos that showed his royal bloodline. He was tall, even for a Velthari, and his presence filled the room like a physical weight. "The Dwellin delegation may approach," announced the court herald. 3 small creatures shuffled forward. They were covered in brown fur, their large eyes fixed on the floor. Their species had been conquered 4 centuries ago. Now they mined rare crystals in deep tunnels, their entire civilization reduced to labor. "Great Archon," the lead Dwellin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We bring the quarterly tribute, 15,000 metric tons of refined stellarium crystal." Velathos did not respond. He simply waved his hand, and the Dwellin were led away. They had served their purpose. They existed to serve. This was the natural order. The strong ruled, the weak served. The Velthari had proven themselves the strongest species in known space. Everything else was simply a resource to be used. The ceremony continued for another hour. Then a chime echoed through the throne room. It was a sound that had not been heard in living memory. The emergency alert of the Orbital Defense Network, Admiral Korath, commander of the Home Fleet, rushed into the throne room. His face was pale, his usual composure shattered. "My Archon," he said, dropping to one knee. "A ship has appeared in high orbit." Velathos leaned forward slightly. "A ship? One ship triggers a planetary alert? It appeared without warning, my Archon. No hyperspace signature. No approach vector. It simply was not there. And then it was. Show me." A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the throne room. It showed the planet Aethon Prime, surrounded by the defensive grid of 3,000 warships, and there, drifting among them like a leaf on still water, was a single vessel. It was small, perhaps 200 meters long. Its hull was angular and dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. There were no visible weapons, no engine glow, no markings of any kind. It looked almost primitive compared to the sleek Velthari warships surrounding it, but there was something wrong about it, something that made Velathos's eyes hurt if he looked too long. The ship seemed to shift slightly, as if it existed in more than one place at once. "What is it?" the Archon demanded. "Unknown, my Archon. It matches no design in our databases. We have hailed it on all frequencies. There has been no response. Scan it. We have tried. The readings are impossible. Our sensors cannot determine its exact position. It seems to exist in a state of quantum uncertainty." Velathos stood from his throne. Around the room, courtiers and delegates fell silent. When the Archon stood, something important was about to happen. "This is our throne world," Velathos said, his voice echoing off the black pillars. "Our seat of power, and some unknown vessel simply appears in our sky and ignores us. We have surrounded it, my Archon. 3,000 ships stand ready. Then perhaps this intruder needs a more direct message. Establish communication, wide beam, all frequencies." The holographic display showed the communication being sent. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the unknown ship responded. The voice that filled the throne room was calm and clear. It spoke in perfect High Veltari, the formal language of the royal court. But there was something strange about it. Something flat and mechanical, yet somehow also warm. "We are cataloging. Do not interfere." The message ended. The ship continued its slow drift through the defense fleet. Velathos felt something he had not experienced in decades. Anger. Real, burning anger. This tiny vessel had appeared uninvited in his sky, ignored his fleet, and now dismissed him with 5 words. "Cataloging?" he repeated. "They are cataloging us? As if we are specimens? As if we are curiosities to be studied?" "My Archon," Admiral Korath said carefully. "Perhaps we should—" "No." Valathos's voice cut through the air like a blade. "I have ruled this empire for 200 years. My father ruled before me, and his father before him. We have crushed rebellions, conquered empires, and brought order to chaos. We do not tolerate insults." He turned to face the holographic display, his golden tattoos seeming to glow with his fury. "Destroy it." Admiral Korath hesitated for just a moment. Then he bowed. "As you command, my Archon." The order went out to the fleet. 3,000 warships turned their weapons toward the tiny vessel. Plasma lances charged. Graviton torpedoes locked on. Particle beams aligned. On the holographic display, the unknown ship continued its slow drift. It made no attempt to flee. It raised no shields. It simply moved through space as if the fleet did not exist. "Fire." The word echoed through every ship in the fleet. And then the sky above Aethon Prime turned white. Thousands of weapons fired simultaneously. Enough firepower to crack a moon. Enough energy to vaporize an asteroid field. Every weapon the Velthari possessed was turned against one small ship. The light was blinding. Even filtered through the holographic display, courtiers had to look away. The bombardment lasted for 30 seconds. Then, silence. When the light faded, Valathos looked at the display, expecting to see nothing but scattered debris. The ship was gone, but not destroyed. There was no debris, no energy signature, no evidence that the vessel had ever existed. The weapons had hit nothing but empty space. "Where is it?" Valathos demanded. "Track it. Find it." "We cannot, my Archon." Admiral Korath's voice was barely a whisper. "All sensors show the target area is empty. The ship is simply gone, gone, as if it had never been there. As if their entire fleet had fired at a ghost." Valathos stood very still. Around him, the throne room was silent. The representatives from conquered worlds watched with wide eyes. The Dwellin delegation, still waiting at the edge of the room, exchanged glances that held something dangerous. "Hope, find it," Valathos said finally. "Search every system. Scan every asteroid. I want to know what that ship was, where it came from, and how to destroy it. Mobilize the intelligence networks. Offer rewards for information. This thing will not make a fool of the Dominion." "Yes, my Archon." As Admiral Korath hurried from the throne room, Valathos returned to his throne. But he did not sit with the same confidence as before. Something had changed. Something small, but important. For the first time in 6,000 years, something had appeared in Velthari space, ignored Velthari power, and escaped Velthari weapons. It was a small thing, a tiny crack in the armor of an empire. But empires had fallen from less, far above the planet, invisible to every sensor the Velthari possessed. A small probe drifted in the darkness. It was barely larger than a fist. Its surface the same light-absorbing black as the ship that had left it behind. It watched, it recorded, it catalogued, and deep in its programming, a simple flag was set. The assessment was complete. The data would be transmitted, and somewhere, far beyond the edges of known space, decisions would be made. The Velthari had fired on a ship of the Terran Confederation. They had demonstrated their nature clearly. Now they would learn what that meant. 3 months had passed since the unknown ship appeared above Aethon Prime. 3 months of searching, scanning, and interrogating. 3 months of finding nothing. Commander Syrath sat in her small office on the mining world of Calith 9, staring at a holographic display filled with useless data. She was young for her position, her gray skin still smooth, her yellow eyes still sharp. The Archon had chosen her personally for this mission. Find the ship, learn its secrets, destroy whoever sent it. So far, she had failed. The display showed everything they knew about the unknown vessel. Its approximate size, its strange quantum readings, the 5 words it had spoken. It was not enough. The ship matched nothing in any database. No species in known space had ever built anything like it. Syrath had traveled to 40 worlds in 3 months. She had questioned scientists, traders, pirates, and diplomats. She had searched ancient archives and recent sensor logs. Every path led nowhere. But today might be different. Today, she had received a message from a contact on Calith 9. An old Dwellin merchant claimed to know something. It was probably nothing. Most leads were nothing. But Syrath had learned to follow every thread, no matter how thin. The Dwellin was waiting in a small tavern near the mining pits. His fur was gray with age, his large eyes clouded. He sat alone at a corner table, a cup of cold tea before him. "You are the Velthari who asks questions about the dark ship," he said as Cirith approached. "I am Commander Cirith of Imperial Intelligence. You said you had information." The old Dwellin nodded slowly. "Sit, please. What I have to say should not be spoken standing." Cirith sat across from him. The tavern was nearly empty. Workers were still in the mines. They would be there for another 6 hours at least. "I do not know what the ship is," the Dwellin said, "but I know what it means." He reached into his worn coat and pulled out a small device, a personal holographic recorder, ancient and scratched. He placed it on the table and activated it. A figure appeared above the table. Another Dwellin, but younger, wearing robes that had not been seen in centuries. The robes of a Dwellin elder, from before the conquest. "This is my grandfather," the old Dwellin said. "He recorded this message 80 years ago, shortly before he died. He said it was important. He said someday someone would need to hear it." The holographic figure began to speak. Its voice was thin with age, but clear. "If you are hearing this, then the dark ship has come. The Watchers have returned. I do not know when this will happen. Perhaps in my grandchildren's time. Perhaps in 1,000 years. But it will happen. It always happens when empires grow too cruel." Cirith leaned forward. "What is this?" "Listen," the old Dwellin said. The recording continued. "Before the Velthari came, before our world was conquered, our elders kept the old stories. Stories passed down for generations beyond counting. Stories of the Wanderers, the Watchers, the ones who came from beyond the stars." The holographic figure paused, as if gathering strength. "They were called many names by many species. But the oldest name, the one our ancestors used, was simply human. They were here long ago, before any empire we know existed. They spread across the stars. They made contact with hundreds of species. They were builders and explorers and dreamers." Cirith felt a chill run down her spine. She had never heard this word before. Human. Then something happened. A great war, fought against an enemy from outside our galaxy. The humans won, but the cost was terrible. When it was over, they gathered their people, their ships, their knowledge, and they left. They went beyond the edge of known space, to places we cannot follow. But they did not forget us. Before they left, they made a promise. They said they would watch. They said they would wait. And they said if slavery returned, if cruelty rose again, they would come back. The recording flickered slightly. "The dark ship is their sign. It means they have found an empire that has grown too evil. It means they are watching. It means judgment is coming. I do not know what form that judgment will take, but the old stories say that when the humans return, no empire can stand against them." The recording ended. The holographic figure faded away. Cirith sat in silence for a long moment. Her mind was racing. This was insane. Ancient legends, children's stories. "And yet, you believe this?" she asked. The old Dwellin smiled sadly. "Does it matter what I believe? You came here looking for answers. I have given you the only one I have. These humans. This is just a myth, a story told by conquered peoples to comfort themselves. Perhaps." The Dwellin picked up his cold tea and took a small sip. "But myths do not appear in the sky above the Archon's throne world. Myths do not survive the weapons of 3,000 warships. Commander, I have lived under Velthari rule for my entire life. My children and grandchildren labor in the mines above us. I have no reason to give you false hope or false fear. I only know what my grandfather told me, and what his grandfather told him." Cirith stood. Her legs felt unsteady. "I need to investigate this further. These stories you mention. Do other species have them? Ask the Corellians, the Menthari, the Joss. Ask any species old enough to remember the time before empires. The stories are different, but they all speak of the same thing. Beings from beyond who watched over the galaxy. Beings who left, but promised to return." Cirith left the tavern and walked into the gray light of Calith 9. Around her, the mining colony continued its work. Slaves of a dozen species moved heavy equipment and hauled raw ore. Velthari overseers watched with weapons ready. She thought about what she had heard. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. But over the next 2 weeks, she found the same story everywhere she looked. The Corellians called them the Silent Guardians. The Minthari called them the Star Shepherds. The Jas called them the Old Ones Who Wait. Every species that had been conquered by the Velthari had some version of the legend. Beings from beyond, watchers, protectors, humans, and now, reports were coming in from across the Dominion. The dark ship had been seen again. Not just one ship, but dozens. They appeared above worlds where slaves worked in chains. They scanned everything. They spoke to no one. And when Velthari ships approached, they simply vanished. Sirath compiled her report and sent it to the Archon. She expected to be dismissed. She expected to be mocked. Ancient legends were not intelligence. Instead, she received new orders within the hour. The Archon was mobilizing a fleet, 50,000 warships, the largest force assembled in centuries. They would travel to a region of space called the Dead Expanse. It was a place the Velthari had always avoided. Ships that entered rarely returned. Communications did not penetrate its strange radiation. But recently, a probe had detected something there. A structure, clearly artificial, of unknown origin. And the energy signature matched the dark ships. Find them, the Archon's message said. Find them, and burn whatever you find. Sirath read the orders twice. She thought about the old Dwellin's words. She thought about legends passed down through countless generations, and for the first time in her career, she felt afraid, not of the unknown ships, not of the mysterious humans, but of what her empire was about to do. The Velthari had never met an enemy they could not defeat. They had grown proud and certain. They believed their power was absolute. Sirath had seen enough to know that absolute certainty was often the last thing an empire felt before its fall. But she was a soldier. She had her orders, and so she prepared to join the fleet, to travel into the Dead Expanse, and to find whatever waited there. She only hoped the legends were wrong. Deep in space, far from any world the Velthari knew, data streams flowed between stars. Reports from 1,000 invisible probes, images of slave worlds and conquered peoples, records of brutality spanning 6 millennia. The cataloging was almost complete, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, ancient ships were waking from their long sleep. Crews were being assembled. Weapons were being charged. The humans had made a promise, long ago. They were about to keep it. The Dead Expanse had earned its name. For as long as the Velthari had traveled the stars, this region of space had been marked on their charts with a simple warning: do not enter. Ships that went in rarely came out. Communications failed within hours of crossing the boundary. Sensors became useless, filled with strange radiation that made every reading meaningless. The Expanse was a blind spot in the galaxy, and the Velthari had been content to leave it that way. Until now, Admiral Koveth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Around him, 50,000 warships moved in formation, the largest fleet assembled in 3 centuries. They had entered the Expanse 6 days ago. They had been blind ever since. Status report, Koveth demanded. Sensors remain non-functional, Admiral. Communication with the rear formations is limited to light burst signals. We have lost contact with 17 ships since entering the Expanse. Lost contact? They simply stopped responding. No distress calls, no weapons fire. They were there, and then they were not. Koveth gripped the railing before him. He was an old soldier, veteran of 100 campaigns. He had never known fear in battle, but this was not battle. This was something else, something that made his instincts scream wrong. Commander Sirath stood at the edge of the bridge, watching the view screen. It showed nothing but swirling radiation, purple and black, like a bruise on the face of space. She had been assigned to the flagship as an intelligence advisor. Her research on the unknown ships had earned her this position. She wished it had not. Admiral, a sensor officer called out, his voice sharp with surprise. The interference is clearing ahead. We are approaching some kind of boundary. Koveth moved to the view screen. He could see it now. The radiation was thinning, like fog burning off in morning light. Beyond it, something waited. The fleet emerged into clear space and stopped. Before them hung a structure of impossible size. It was clearly artificial, built from materials that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. It was shaped like a sphere, but sections of it were missing, as if it had been partially disassembled or partially built. It was hard to tell which. Size estimate? Koveth asked. Approximately 1,200 kilometers in diameter, Admiral. Larger than our largest space station by a factor of 40. Life signs? None detected. The structure appears dormant. Power readings are minimal. Koveth studied the ancient construction. It hung in space like a dead god, silent and patient. And its design, despite the damage and age, matched the unknown ships exactly. Send a boarding party, he ordered. Full combat gear. I want to know what that thing is. Sirith stepped forward. Admiral, request permission to join the boarding party. Koveth looked at her. You are an intelligence officer, not a soldier. With respect, Admiral, I have studied these ships more than anyone. If there are answers inside that structure, I am best qualified to understand them. The Admiral considered for a moment, then nodded. Very well, but stay behind the combat teams. The shuttle approached the structure carefully. Up close, its surface was covered in patterns that might have been writing or might have been art. It was impossible to tell. The scale was overwhelming. The shuttle was like an insect approaching a mountain. They found an opening in the structure's surface. It was large enough to fly the shuttle through. Beyond it, the interior opened into vast corridors and chambers, all dark, all silent. The boarding party moved through the ancient halls with weapons ready. Emergency lights cast dim pools of illumination. The air was breathable, though stale. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust that had not been disturbed in ages. Over here, someone called. They had found a chamber that still had power. Holographic displays flickered on the walls, showing images that cycled in endless loops. Stars, planets, species, ships. Sirith moved closer, her heart pounding. The images were a record, a history. She saw the galaxy as it had been long ago, not empty, but full of life. Hundreds of species building, exploring, reaching for the stars. And among them, one species that appeared again and again. They looked strange to her eyes. Soft skin in various shades. No scales, no fur. Tall and short, thin and broad. They wore simple clothing and carried simple tools. They did not look like conquerors, but the images showed them everywhere. Building stations, meeting other species, trading, teaching, learning, humans, Sirith whispered. The holographic display shifted. Now it showed something different, something dark. Ships that did not belong to this galaxy. Vast, terrible vessels that emerged from the void between stars. War. The images were chaotic. Fleets clashing, worlds burning, species dying. And through it all, the humans fought. They built weapons. They formed alliances. They sacrificed everything. They won. The final images showed the aftermath. A galaxy scarred but free. And the humans, gathering their ships, their people, their knowledge, leaving. A voice spoke from the display. It was recorded long ago, but it was clear. We cannot stay. The war has changed us too much. Our power has grown too great. If we remain, we will become what we fought against. But we will not abandon you. We will watch from beyond. We will wait. And if darkness rises again, if cruelty becomes empire, we will return. The recording ended. The chamber fell silent. Sirith understood now. The legends were true. All of them. Admiral, she said into her communicator. You need to see this. But before Koveth could respond, every light in the structure went out. When they came back on, seconds later, everything had changed. Sirith rushed back to the shuttle, back to the flagship. On the bridge, Admiral Koveth was staring at the viewscreen with an expression she had never seen on a Velthari face. Terror. The space around the fleet was no longer empty. Ships were appearing from everywhere. From behind asteroids. From folds in space. From within the structure itself. Hundreds of ships. Then thousands. Then more. They were beautiful and terrible. Some were small and fast. Some were massive, dwarfing even the largest Velthari battleships. They were dark, angular, and they moved with a precision that made Velthari formations look clumsy. Where did they come from? Koveth demanded. Unknown, Admiral. They simply appeared. They must have been cloaked the entire time. The Velthari fleet was completely surrounded. 50,000 warships, the pride of the Dominion, trapped like fish in a net. Koveth straightened his spine. He was an admiral of the Velthari Empire. He would not show fear. Charge all weapons. Raise shields. Prepare for combat. The weapons officer turned pale. Admiral, our weapons are not charging. I am receiving error codes across all systems. What? It is the same across the fleet. Every ship is reporting system failures. Weapons offline, shields offline, engines at minimal power. We cannot fight. Koveth stared at the screen. The unknown ships had not fired a single shot. They had simply turned everything off. A transmission came through. It was received by every ship in the fleet simultaneously. The voice was human, calm, final, cataloging complete. Judgment rendered. Your empire is dissolved. Respond. Koveth ordered. Tell them we will not surrender. Tell them the Dominion does not. The lights went out. Every system on every ship went dark. 50,000 vessels drifted helplessly in the void, their crews alive but powerless. In the darkness of the bridge, Sireth could hear Admiral Koveth's ragged breathing. She could hear the whispered prayers of crew members who had never known defeat. The humans had returned, and the Velthari, for all their pride, for all their power, had never stood a chance. The ships that surrounded them did not attack. They did not need to. The Velthari fleet was already beaten. Now it was simply cargo, to be carried home and shown to a galaxy that had waited 6,000 years for justice. In the darkness, Sireth closed her eyes and thought of the old Dwellin's words. When the humans return, no empire can stand against them. He had been right. The legends had been right. And the Dominion was already dead. It just did not know it yet. The fall of the Velthari Dominion took exactly 1 day. It happened everywhere at once. On 12,000 worlds, across 100,000 light years, the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known was taken apart like a child's toy. And the conquerors did not fire a single weapon. On the industrial world of Korthan 7, slave workers looked up from their machines as every Velthari guard suddenly collapsed. They were not dead, they were simply asleep, dropped by something invisible and precise. When the workers tested their shock collars, they found them dead. Every collar, every chain, every lock. On the agricultural moon of Essen, Minthari farmers watched as Velthari patrol ships fell from the sky. They landed softly, guided by forces beyond understanding. Their crews stumbled out, dazed and confused, to find their weapons would not work. Their communications reached no one. Their authority was gone. On 1,000 military bases, 1 million warships, and 10 million installations, the same scene played out. Power failures, disabled weapons, sleeping guards, and everywhere, broadcast on every frequency. The same message in every language. You are free. Those who held you answer to us now. The message came from ships that appeared in the skies of every world. Dark, angular vessels that the legends had warned about. Ships of the humans, ships of the Watchers, ships of judgment. But it was on Aethon Prime that the true reckoning occurred. High Archon Valathos III was in his throne room when they came. He had spent the morning receiving reports of the fleet's disappearance in the dead expanse. He had spent the afternoon ordering emergency measures that no one could implement. By evening, he knew the truth. His empire was already gone. He was simply the last to accept it. The humans did not use doors. One moment, the throne room was filled with panicking courtiers and useless generals. The next moment, there was a flash of light, and they appeared, 20 soldiers in dark armor, surrounding a woman with silver hair and tired eyes. The Velthari guards raised their weapons. Nothing happened. They pulled triggers that did not respond. They drew blades that crumbled to dust in their hands. Then they simply stood there, helpless, as the humans walked past them. The silver-haired woman approached the throne. She moved slowly, without urgency. She had done this before. Many times. Valathos rose to his full height. He was still an Archon. He would face his end with dignity. I am High Archon Valathos III, ruler of the Velthari Dominion. By what right do you invade my world? By what authority do you attack my empire? The woman stopped a few meters from the throne. She removed her helmet and held it under her arm. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp. I am Admiral Chen, 7th Expeditionary Fleet, Terran Confederation. We are not invading. We are correcting. Correcting? Valathos laughed. It was a bitter sound. You speak as if we are children who have misbehaved. You enslaved 47 species. You worked billions to death in your mines and factories. You erased cultures, destroyed languages, and called it civilization. For 6,000 years, you told yourselves that this was the natural order. That strength gave you the right to rule. Admiral Chen's voice was calm, almost sad. You were wrong. Valathos gripped the arms of his throne. And who are you to judge us? We have never seen your kind. You are strangers, outsiders. What gives you the right? We gave ourselves the right, long ago, when we decided that some things were unacceptable. Slavery is unacceptable. Genocide is unacceptable. The strong crushing the weak because they can is unacceptable. She stepped closer. We did not want to come back. We left this galaxy hoping that the species we knew would grow beyond cruelty. For a long time, many did. Then your ancestors rose to power. We watched as you conquered your first world. We watched as you took your first slaves. We hoped you would change. You did not. You watched. Valathos felt cold. For how long? For all of it. We have been watching since before your empire began. Our probes, our sensors, our watchers. We see everything. We record everything. We gave you 6,000 years to become better. You only became worse. The Archon's mind raced. 6,000 years. They had been watching for 6,000 years. Every crime, every atrocity, every act of cruelty, all of it recorded, all of it judged. What do you want? He asked. His voice had lost its strength. The Dominion is dissolved. Your military is disabled. Your leaders will face trial for crimes against sentient life. The species you enslaved will be given support to rebuild their worlds and their cultures. And my people? The Velthari people? Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. Your people are not guilty of the choices their rulers made. They will be helped, not punished, but they will no longer rule. They will learn to live as equals among the species they once oppressed. It will not be easy. It will take generations. But it will happen. Valathos felt the weight of millennia pressing down on him. His family had built this empire. His ancestors had conquered the stars. And now, in a single day, it was all gone. We will resist, he said, though even he did not believe it. We will fight. You will do nothing. Admiral Chen's voice was gentle but absolute. Your weapons do not work. Your ships do not fly. Your communications reach no one. You cannot fight us because you cannot touch us. Our technology is not better than yours. It is different. It operates on principles you do not understand and cannot counter. She paused. There will be no war. Wars require two sides capable of fighting. This is not a war. This is an end. Valathos looked around his throne room. His guards stood frozen, their weapons useless. His generals had no forces to command. His courtiers had nothing left to scheme for. In desperation, he reached beneath his throne and touched a hidden panel. A final option, built into the palace centuries ago. A planet killer, buried deep beneath the surface. Designed to destroy Aethon Prime rather than let it fall to enemies. He pressed the activation sequence. Nothing happened. Admiral Chen watched him without surprise. We disabled that weapon 3 months ago, during the first scan. Along with every other doomsday device in your arsenal. The Archon stared at her. How? We have been watching for a very long time. Did you think we would not be thorough? 2 human soldiers stepped forward and took Valathos by the arms. Gently, without violence, they led him away from the throne he had occupied for 2 centuries. As he passed Admiral Chen, the Archon stopped. There was one question he needed to ask. One thing he needed to understand. Why? Why do you care about species you have never met? Why cross the galaxy to free people who are nothing to you? Admiral Chen met his eyes. For a moment, she looked unbearably tired. A woman who had seen too much and done too much. A woman carrying a weight that never got lighter. Because someone should, they led him away. The throne room emptied. And on Aethon Prime, as on 12,000 other worlds, a new age began. It would not be easy. Freedom never was. The Velthari would struggle with their loss of power. The freed species would struggle to rebuild. Old wounds would take centuries to heal. But for the first time in 6,000 years, every sentient being in what had been the Dominion went to sleep knowing that they were no longer property. In the sky above Aethon Prime, human ships hung in silent watch. They would stay until the transition was complete, until justice was done, until hope had taken root. It was what they did, what they had always done. The galaxy had forgotten them, had turned them into legends, into myths, into bedtime stories, but they had never forgotten the galaxy. And they never would. 1 year had passed since the fall of the Dominion. The galaxy was still learning how to breathe without chains. On the world that had once been called Calith 9, the mining pits were quiet, not abandoned, but transformed. The slaves who had worked there were now citizens. They owned the mines. They chose their own hours. They kept their own profits. It was strange and frightening and wonderful all at once. Commander Syrath walked through the settlement that had grown around the old mining camp. She still wore her uniform, though it meant nothing now. Old habits died hard. She had been released with the other Velthari soldiers, given a choice between leaving or staying to help rebuild. She had chosen to stay. The humans had been surprised by that. They had expected hatred from the Velthari, resistance, anger. Some of that existed. But Sirath had seen the records in the ancient structure. She had understood what her people had become. She could not undo the past, but she could help build something better. A human walked beside her, through the settlement. His name was Thomas. He was an engineer, part of the reconstruction teams that had spread across the former Dominion. He was young by human standards, though Syrath had learned that humans lived longer than they looked. He had kind eyes and calloused hands, and he never treated her as an enemy. The water purification plant is operational, Thomas said, checking a small device in his hand. The agricultural domes should be producing within the month. This settlement will be self-sufficient by winter. The Dwellin are good builders, Syrath said. They always were. We just never let them build for themselves. Thomas nodded. He did not judge her for the we in that sentence. He understood that guilt was complicated, that some Velthari had been cruel, and some had simply followed orders, and most had never thought about it at all. That was how empires worked. They made cruelty normal. They made people stop seeing. Can I ask you something? Sirath said. Of course. Why do your people seem so sad? Thomas stopped walking. Around them, Dwellin workers carried materials and called to each other in their own language. Free for the first time in 4 centuries. Do we seem sad? Yes. Even when you smile. Even when you celebrate. There is something underneath. Something heavy. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down on a low wall and looked up at the pale sky. We have done this 17 times, he said. Done what? This. Watched an empire rise. Watched it enslave and conquer and convince itself that cruelty was natural. Waited, hoping it would change. Then returned to tear it down when it did not. He picked up a small stone and turned it over in his hands. The first time, we thought it was unique. A single species that had gone wrong. We fixed it and hoped that was the end. But it happened again. And again. Every few centuries, somewhere in the galaxy, someone decides that power gives them the right to rule others. Someone decides that their species is special, chosen, destined, and you stop them. We stop them. Every time. We catalog their crimes. We disable their weapons. We free their slaves. We hold their leaders accountable. And then we leave. And we hope that this time will be different. That the next empire will not rise. That the galaxy will finally learn. Sirath sat beside him. But it never does. No. Thomas's voice was soft. It never does. 17 empires in 12,000 years. 17 times we have done this. And each time, we hope it will be the last. We want so badly to stop being the galaxy's conscience. To rest. To know that the people we left behind can take care of themselves. But you keep watching. We keep watching. It is who we are now. The war changed us, Sirath. The enemy we fought. The things we had to do to survive. When it was over, we looked at ourselves and saw what we had become. We had power beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. We could have ruled it all. Every species, every world, every star. He dropped the stone. We chose not to. Because we understood that power without purpose is just another kind of cruelty. That ruling others, even with good intentions, leads to the same place every time. So we left. We watch. We wait. And when we must, we act. Syrath thought about her own people. About the empire they had built. About how easy it had been to see conquered species as less than real. About how normal cruelty had seemed when everyone around you accepted it. Do you think we can change? She asked. Thomas smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. I think you already are. You are here, helping people your empire once owned. You are trying to understand, instead of defend. That is more than most. He stood up. The galaxy is not bad, Sirath. Most species are not evil. They just get lost sometimes. They forget that the aliens on the next world are people too. They convince themselves that their own comfort matters more than others' freedom. It is a sickness, but it can be cured. We have seen species recover from it. We have seen former empires become forces for good. Is that what you hope for us? It is what we hope for everyone. It is why we do this. Not for revenge, not for punishment, for hope. The crazy, stubborn hope that someday we will not be needed anymore. That evening, Sirath attended a celebration in the settlement. The Dwellin were marking the 1-year anniversary of their freedom. There was food and music and dancing. Children ran between the buildings, laughing in ways that would have been punished under Velthari rule. She stood at the edge of the gathering, watching. A small Dwellin child approached her. The child's fur was brown and soft, and her large eyes looked up without fear. "Are you the Velthari who helps?" the child asked. "I try to be. My grandmother says your people were bad." Sirath nodded. "We were. Are you bad?" It was such a simple question. Sirath thought about all the things she had done, all the orders she had followed, all the suffering she had witnessed and done nothing to stop. "I was not as good as I should have been," she said finally. "But I am trying to be better." The child considered this. Then she held out her small hand. In it was a piece of sweet bread, the kind the Dwellin made for celebrations. "My grandmother says people who try to be better should eat sweet bread." Sirath took the offering. It was still warm. She bit into it and tasted honey and grain and something that might have been forgiveness. "Thank you," she said. The child smiled and ran off to join her friends. Across the settlement, Thomas watched the exchange. He thought about the 17 empires, the billions of freed slaves, the centuries of watching and waiting and hoping. He thought about how tired he was, how tired they all were. But moments like this made it worth it. A child sharing bread with a former oppressor. A soldier choosing redemption over denial. A galaxy slowly, painfully, learning to be better. That night, after the celebration ended, a small Dwellin girl sat with her grandmother outside their new home. The sky was clear, and the stars burned bright. "Grandmother, will the humans stay forever?" The old Dwellin looked up at the stars. Somewhere among them, invisible and silent, human ships kept their endless watch. They will stay as long as they are needed, and even when they leave, they will not truly go. They are watching us, child, watching over us. They have been watching since before your grandmother's grandmother was born. Why? Because long ago, they fought a great war. When it was over, they could have become rulers themselves. They could have taken everything. Instead, they chose to protect, to watch, to hope. The child leaned against her grandmother. That sounds lonely. Perhaps it is. But they do it anyway. Because someone has to. Because they believe the galaxy can be better than it is. Will it get better, I mean? The grandmother pulled her close. "I do not know, child. But for the first time in my life, I believe it might. And that is because of them." High above, a human probe drifted silently through the darkness. Its sensors were active, its transmitters were ready. It watched and recorded and cataloged, waiting, hoping, believing. Far beyond the edge of known space, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of her flagship and looked back at the galaxy she had sworn to protect. 17 empires, 17 corrections, and still the work continued. She was tired. They were all tired. But there was no one else. No one else who could do what they did. No one else willing to carry the weight. She thought about the Dwellin child sharing bread, about Commander Sirath choosing to help instead of hate, about 1,000 small moments of grace sprouting from the ashes of cruelty. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe the 18th Empire would never rise. Maybe the galaxy was finally learning. She allowed herself to hope. And in the darkness between stars, humanity kept its long watch, as it always had, as it always would, because someone should.